Does the F-35 have a kill switch that can be activated by the United States when the aircraft is used against their interest? This is a question that many in Europe are asking, and in this video we will try to answer. Hi everyone, I'm Gas. Welcome to Millennium 7. Sorry for recording this in the car, but I am traveling this week, so I have to make do with what I have. So this question about the kill switch on the F-35 has been prompted by the radical change of tack of the Trump administration in terms of foreign policy and attitude toward some of the allies, particularly the allies being part of NATO. There are a few examples of this change of attitude. For example, with Canada, where Trump said that Canada should become the 51st state of the United States, or the request to acquire Greenland from Denmark, because this is for the greater good of the free world. But also there's a general politics of cooling down the relationship with Europe that has always been one of the key allies of the United States, which seems to be the prelude to an American disengagement from the European continent. And some commentators go as far as saying that the United States may leave the NATO alliance. Obviously, most of the European political ruling class has grown and has operated since forever within an Atlantist framework, and the fact that this may become is leaving them with no reference points. So there is a bit of confusion in many European capitals today. And within this context, doubts were raised about the sovereignty implications of the F-35 program. So, for example, we have a Canadian initiative where the new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, in one of his first decisions, asked the Defense Minister to execute a comprehensive revision of the Canadian F-35 program for 88 aircraft. And the working hypothesis was that Canada might buy the first lot of aircraft that have been already ordered and paid, as 16 aircraft. But the rest of the program may not go ahead, and all of this on geopolitical concerns rather than technical, industrial, or military concerns. The Portuguese government is doing a similar operation. Portugal needs to replace an aging fleet of F-16s that are now basically obsolete. The decision was to acquire the F-16, but now this decision is put in discussion exactly for the same reasons as Canada does. Trump didn't say anything about Portugal, but his engagement policy is leaving some doubts. And then there is the very important German discussion. Germany is going to acquire 35 F-35s, and their role will be to replace the older Tornado. This is a very important role because those Tornadoes are part of the NATO nuclear deterrent for delivery. That is, Germany, but even other countries, for example, like Italy, need to provide a certain number of attack aircraft to deliver the nukes that are part of the NATO dispositive. And this new American policy sparked the harsh debate about the opportunity of keep going with the acquisition, and the European defense industry chimed in. Airbus said, stop the acquisition of the F-35s. We can make something equivalent quite quickly to replace your Tornadoes, and so on. This discussion is actually not new. Very few will remember an Italian journalist named Tony De Marchi writing on the newspaper Il Fatto Quotidiano that several years ago, I think 2016, 2017, unfortunately I couldn't find the original article, but several years ago Tony was raising this issue, and he never really got a satisfactory answer from the Italian Air Force. The answer was along the lines of, well, the sovereignty is safeguarded, no worries. I tried to contact this gentleman to have some more details, but unfortunately, I discovered that he passed away in 2022, and he was a journalist I had some affinity with because we shared the same passions for aircraft and military stuff, and sound reproduction, hi-fi, and so on. So unfortunately, I can't give you the exact reference of the story, but I'm sure it happened. I distinctly remember it.
Obviously, this story is a big deal. It has been extensively covered by traditional media, and if you want to navigate the landscape of traditional media, you need a tool like Ground News, which is sponsoring this video.
Ground News is a website and an app that gathers related articles from more than 50,000 sources around the world in one place, so you can compare how different outlets cover the same subject. Every story comes with a clear breakdown of the political bias, credibility, ownership, and then headlines of the sources reporting, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. So we can use Ground News to analyze how the story has been covered by different media outlets. And here it is, fear and rumors of a kill switch on US-built aircraft swirl among European officials amidst tapering US support of Ukraine. As you can see, this is a story that has had quite a large coverage, 70 sources, and the bias distribution is more or less balanced. So everything seems fine, but if we want to compare the spin from the left and from the right, we just need to click on left, and well, the titles are relatively measured. Can the US choose to switch off European weapons? Germany beginning to reconsider its F-35 fighter jet order, and so on. But if we click on the right, if Trump wants to, Europe's F-35s will stay on the ground. US can cripple weapons systems in Europe, Donald Trump's new blackmail weapon causes deep concern, and so on. As you can see, the spin is very different, and if you want to have a balanced view, you must use Ground News. Ground News is very important for my research since I try to be as factual and unbiased as I can about something that often is neither black nor white. If you sign up through my link, you'll get 40% off the Vantage plan, which is what I use to get unlimited access to all the features. I think Ground News is doing a great job, and I hope you'll check them out. Please support the people who support me.
So, do the Americans hold a kill switch? Well, Lockheed Martin went on record saying, no, the switch doesn't exist. We are committed to give our customers the best, and yada, yada, yada. On the back of this declaration, the debate, even in Europe, slowly subsided. There have been some declarations that the programs about the F-35 kept going in various countries. So, case closed? Well, I'm not so sure. First of all, there is a kill switch. It's not hardware, it's not software, it is contractual. In fact, part of the German contract for the acquisition of the F-35 has been leaked as part of this debate that they are having in Germany, and there are indeed provisions for the aircraft not to be used if its use ends up being against the United States interest. These contractual clauses are pretty normal. For example, the Germans are famous for having had a row with Turkey that used their Leopard tanks to attack some Kurds forces in Syria in offensive operations, while the acquisition contract said that they had to be used only for defensive purposes. So it's not surprising that something similar exists for the F-35. This is just a contract, and contracts, like treaties, are just pieces of paper. They end up being respected only if all the parties involved calculate that respecting the contract is indeed beneficial to their aims. Otherwise, they are broken, disregarded, ignored, and so on. You may not like it, and I certainly don't, but this is how the world works. However, there are other points, and if they are not real kill switches, they could work potentially like one. Obviously, the F-35 needs spares, like every aircraft. And the way these pairs relate with the F-35 is highly engineered. You may have heard of the infamous ALICE systems that is used, among other things, to manage the aircraft maintenance, and its replacement, Odin. This system connects with the aircraft on the ground, but also when the aircraft is in flight, when it is safe to do so. And their purpose is to use predictive algorithms to execute predictive maintenance on the aircraft. Predictive maintenance now is standard in many areas, and it works pretty well. I have direct experience of implementing these kind of systems myself in my previous life. So when the ALICE will calculate that a component on the aircraft is going to fail in the next few hours, it actually automatically issues an order to Lockheed Martin to deliver that component to the unit flying the aircraft, so it could be replaced and the aircraft kept flying. At least this is the theory, because ALICE has been plagued by several issues, and often the ground maintainers in the units flying the aircraft have had to resort to shortcuts or cutting corners to keep the aircraft flying. That's the reason why Odin is replacing it. However, beyond the ALICE quirks, there is another problem which is at the root of the F-35 low availability problem. All the spares are drawn from a single pool reserved for all the international customers, managed by Lockheed Martin. As I was saying, this system of doing just-in-time on combat aircraft is not really working properly. Steps are being taken to fix it, but apparently is a sort of a contractual maze that will be very difficult to untangle. For what we are concerned, if Lockheed Martin is managing all the spares, and Lockheed Martin is an American company, it is not too hard to imagine that upon a US government order, this entire supply chain can be shut down from a single central point. This is not a kill switch. The aircraft in the immediate will keep flying, but their readiness will progressively degrade to the point they will have no practical utility anymore. Well, you may think that this is a problem that is connaturate to every foreign weapon acquisition, and indeed it is to a certain extent, but while with other aircraft, admittedly simpler aircraft, it is possible to compensate for a lack of spares and the lack of supplies and keep the aircraft flying, for the F-35 is practically impossible. But there is another element that could potentially work as a kill switch. The F-35 makes use of scenario files. These are large, hundreds of gigabytes, databases that contain information on every potential opponent the aircraft can encounter during its missions. These are essential to make one of the key features of the F-35 work. One of the reasons why the F-35 has a great situational awareness is the capability to identify a radar track or an optical track automatically and classify it very reliably. Obviously, a civilian aircraft or a friendly aircraft will be identified by transponders or IFF. But what happens if the target is not cooperating? Well, there is an entire module on the F-35 dedicated of using subtle cues in the radar returns rather than the infrared returns, or from the electromagnetic emissions of an unknown target that can identify quite reliably the target itself. The aircraft is telling you that that blip on the radar is a Su-30 in an air-to-air configuration, for example. Furthermore, in these files, it is included the order of battle of the potential opponents, at least for what is relevant for air operations. So these files contain an enormous amount of very secret, very classified information. And they're not easy to build. Actually, you need to collect and fuse an enormous amount of information. You also have to do experiments to see how a specific aircraft shape is reflecting the radars, for example, and it is not easy. I mean, the F-35 is not the only aircraft that has this kind of libraries of threats. They're very common, to be honest. Every modern aircraft has its own libraries. But as far as we know, there is no other aircraft that is as thorough as the F-35 is in using this information. These files cannot be made by the single users. There are some centers in the United States dedicated to keep these files up to date, and then the scenario files are downloaded onto the aircraft. For example, one of the early problems that the F-35 had, particularly the naval variants, was that there was limited bandwidth available to download the files, so it took a very long time. However, from the point of view of a non-US user, these files are only made in the United States. And this is another dependence that may have a large impact on the aircraft effectiveness. Moreover, it is not clear, at least not yet, how fast the Americans could react to support one of the parties that is involved in a shooting conflict that doesn't involve the Americans, for example. Again, from the point of view of the kill switch, this is not exactly a kill switch, but it is a way that the United States could potentially cripple the aircraft and make it less effective in the long run. So, the problem of the spares, the problem of the scenario files, but there is a third problem, potentially, that could be used as a kill switch. Every modern aircraft has its own security. Basically, you need to enter the equivalent of a username and a password or use some form of a key to make it work. It's very difficult to find any information about these issues for obvious reasons, but there is at least one case that made the news. In fact, apparently, when the Chinese acquired the Su-35, they either voluntarily or accidentally ended up breaking one. So they had to ask the Russians to come to China and unbreak the aircraft, which the Russians did. Some say that the Chinese did that to see how the Russians did the operation of unbreaking the aircraft. But whatever the reason, this is clear confirmation that this sort of mechanism does exist on many aircraft, even the Russian ones in this case. The F-35, from this point of view, is considered unclassified at the line of assembly. That is, it can be assembled by workers that don't have a specifically high security clearance. Many components, particularly all the electronic components, have anti-tamper mechanisms. So if you try to open them or you use them improperly, they break. And we know that some small accidents have happened on the assembly lines because of mistakes that cause these boxes to break. You always have to remember that the non-US users of the F-35 have not been given access to the software, with the single exception of Israel that has some partial software it can bolt some components on. And one of the ways of keeping the software safe and secure is exactly using this anti-tamper mechanism. From the point of view of this video, though, the question is, who is managing all these codes that are necessary to make the aircraft work? I mean, the anti-tamper mechanisms are obviously American, but the codes that are used to maintain the aircraft, to start the aircraft, and so on, how are they managed? Are they managed nationally? It is something that you need to connect to a server in the United States to have them. Who is issuing them? We don't know that. So this is something to consider that might be turned into a kill switch eventually. As I said, for this specific point, we don't know whether it is the case, but it is a possibility. Anyway, if you have been with me so far, you will have realized that there are several ways
that the United States could use to reduce the aircraft effectiveness. However, the F-35 operators, at least some of them, are not entirely powerless. In fact, many components of the F-35 are built abroad. Some of them are only built abroad.
One important example is the lift fan on the F-35B, which is actually produced by Rolls-Royce in the United Kingdom, and only by Rolls-Royce in the United Kingdom. However, the general policy for the F-35 supply chain is to have main sources and spare sources. There is very little that doesn't have a spare source. Even if the international partners that have been, let's say, denied access to the scenario files would hit back, not selling the F-35 parts anymore to the United States, there are mitigations. I think that overall a concerted effort from the international partners could create some serious issues, to the production of the F-35, but those would be temporary issues anyway. I am pretty sure that the United States could re-establish local supply chains with not too much difficulty. And this takes us to the final question. Does the kill switch exist? Does the kill switch on the F-35 exist? Well, I personally think that it does, because after the discussion we just had, it is clear that it makes sense. All the other methodologies that the US would have to stop an operation that is against its own interest are quite slow. And there is also a small but potentially annoying dependency of the United States on the international partners. So it would be really strange that being in the position of hiding in the software this kind of feature that maybe disables all the combat features of the aircraft, left the aircraft flying, but makes it unable to use the weapons or the sensors, it makes too much sense for not including it. And I don't know, but I personally believe that many other combat aircraft, many modern aircraft that in a way or another connect with servers or anything like that, should have something similar that is probably the best kept secret of the entire aircraft, but this should exist because it's just too dangerous not having it. There is a lesson that we probably have forgotten. During the conflict between the United Kingdom and Argentina in 1982 at the Falklands, the Royal Navy received a lot of damage from weapons built in the West. The iron bombs used by the Argentinian aircraft had been built in the UK. The Argentinian aircraft carrier, the 25 de Mayo, was an ex-British ship. The Exocet that destroyed the HMS Sheffield was a French weapon. France was completely aligned with the British during the conflict. I think that was a lesson that has been learned in many headquarters, that a kill switch in modern weapons was necessary. I think that having a kill switch makes sense. I don't have any piece of information that makes me think that it really exists, but it would be really sensible if it was there. I may be wrong, maybe we will learn more in the future, I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, thank you very much for watching so far. Thank you very much for having given me your attention and your time. An enormous thank you to all those who are supporting the channel financially on Patreon by being a member and by any of the other means available. And if you can't support the channel, and that's perfectly fine, do it only if you can. Please subscribe if you haven't. About half of the people who watch my channel haven't subscribed, and I don't know why. But also hit like, hit the bell, leave a comment, interact with the video, because that is helping with the algorithm, which has not been particularly kind to me lately. So we need to tell the algorithm that these videos are actually interesting and a lot more people could be interested in them. So this is everything. Thank you very much for watching and see you next time.